Number 1. Blackpill means you should give up on dating forever. This is perhaps the biggest misconception about the ideology I regularly see. And I believe it stems from this idea that if most men start out blue-pilled, implying they are hopeful and optimistic about dating, then when this fails, they move on to red pill, which is supposed to teach them the truth, like the importance of learning game, going to the gym, and acquiring money. Then, if this fails, the only option left for guys is to give up. AKA, you've reached the black pill and this is your final destination. Now, while this model sounds like it makes sense and is easy to remember, I believe it falls apart at the final hurdle. I want to make clear, black pill does not mean you give up on dating forever. Instead, the way as I would describe it means 3 things. 1. Accepting the fact that women only date up in terms of value. In other words, you need to be bringing more to the table than she does. 2. The importance of looks. This means you believe it is at the very least 50%, but realistically more like 75 to 90% of the overall equation. And 3. The genetic role for looks. This is accepting that of that 75 to 90% mentioned in point 2, it is mostly genetics. So comprising of factors like your facial structure, height, frame, presence of balding, etc. Anyway, based on these 3 things, it's quite clear at no points it says you should give up. So I'm not entirely sure how people reach this conclusion if they analyse these 3 tenets one by one. Now, the final factor does say genetics contributes a large part to your dating life, which obviously is something out of your control. However, there is also a decently sized chunk that is inside your control which you can always improve on. Blackpill also recognises that most guys by default are normies, implying things like gym, money and social skills can help them. Whether they could ever reach Chad, that's a question for another day. But for most normies, assuming they're neurotypical, average height or above, and have at least some work ethic, they can get some casual dating success or a relationship if they try to. As for sub-5s, this one is a bit trickier, but as I've outlined in a previous video of mine, what should you do in your dating life, there are still some solutions available which I won't go into depth here, but if you follow the chart, there are options and at no points does it say to give up. Anyway, going back to the 3-tier model, the way I would change these to more accurately depict what each side represents is the blue pill has nice sounding theories but ultimately teaches you the wrong things. E.g., contrary to what your teachers, mummy and daddy and Disney movies had you believe growing up, being the nice guy doesn't work. Same goes with being a simp. It doesn't work. Confessing feelings doesn't work. And giving women validation in order to get something in return also doesn't work. As for the red pill, this actually teaches you a lot of right things, but exaggerates how much an impact they'll have on your dating life. Then, finally, the black pill teaches you a lot of similar things to the red pill, plus a few extras too. But more importantly, it teaches you the return on investment for these things is roughly 5 times lower than what the red pill says. Or, put simply, red pillers believe any man can go from a 1 to a 10. While black pillers believe a man can go from a 5 to a 6.5 if he plays his cards right. Which is more than enough to have dating success, provided again you're at least average height, etc, etc. Lastly, as a final point for why black pill equals give up is a misconception, is the name certainly doesn't help its cause or do justice encapsulating what it represents. I believe if it was instead named the yellow or green pill, there'd almost certainly be less associations with nihilism, and rather there'd be much more of an association with what I actually think it stands for, realism. If you read the 3 tenets again I outlined at the beginning, I think it's very hard to not say it lives up to this words. Anyway, that's the first misconception. The second one I often see is blackpillers are just lazy and want to make excuses for why they can't get girls and don't want to put in the work. Wow, This is probably one of the biggest ones, and it's striking because it goes completely against reality. In my experience, blackpillers actually try harder than most ordinary people. Using the data from my Fiverr service, I found that 15% of my followers are jacked, meaning they'd put hundreds of hours into the gym and have consistently maintained a healthy diet. That's almost 1 in 7 people in this community. In contrast, I can assure you, if you walk down the street, well under 1 in 7 guys will be jacked. It'll probably be more like 1 in 25 or 1 in 30. Secondly, on this poll I released on my channel, 87% of guys voted they at least somewhat consider themselves on self-improvements, with over half answering convincingly yes. Furthermore, in this poll on my channel, 60% of men said watching my content makes them want to look smacks more than they did beforehand. Meanwhile, just 7% said they like to do it less. This shows out of the people that watch my content, there are approximately 9 times as many people that want to put more effort into their appearance than those who are taking something negative from my content and using it as an excuse to dither and wither. Anyway, these are some data-based reasons why the excuse misconception is wrong. But the explanation for why this is because of all the people who decide to become blackpilled, very few do so before at least giving dating a go and trying their luck in the market first. And no, I'm not talking about getting rejected once by the hottest girl in school. I'm talking about going through countless rejections, trying a dozen different strategies, and then you realise there's just no other conclusion that can be true besides blackpill. I'm pretty sure all of you watching can say you've experienced this. Explained in a different way, it's a tough thing to accept for any man that your looks is the biggest determinant in your dating life. Believe me, most guys would want schools of thought like the blue pill and red pill to be true. That way, dating would come as no problem to them. But it's only when people realise through their own experiences of rejection that these sets of beliefs either completely lied to you or didn't give you the full picture. And it leads the only remaining conclusion is that of the black pill. Furthermore, just to give an example of myself, the way I discovered the black pill was like most other guys. I first tried blue pill techniques that I learned through my parents and the mainstream media. I found this didn't work, so I then transitioned to red pill and tried implementing these strategies, which also didn't work, so finally I transitioned to black pill and found out just how important looks are. And only then, after religiously focusing on looks maxing, was I able to get dating success. Final point on this, although yes, it's true red pill teaches looks maxing as well, what I thought when I was red pilled is that it was always pushed to one side and treated as an afterthought. And instead, the biggest things instilled by the red pillars were 3 things: game, money, and status. So, for the time I was red pilled, I predominantly focused on these, which led me to not taking looks maxing as seriously. In contrast, only the black pill drills home the importance of looks maxing like no other, which is why it had such a dramatic improvement on my dating life. Anyway, now moving on to the third misconception. Black pillars believe looks is everything. This argument is made by people who want to summarise our ideology in a single sentence, which then makes it an easy way to chalk it off as some crazy idea that's easily disprovable. But they disregard that in our community we talk about lots of nuance. Yes, we believe looks is the most important in all 3 environments. However, other factors like status, money, and social skills can all come into play to varying degrees depending on which environment you choose. For example, most people would agree that on online dating, looks may as well be everything, or at least 90%. It's a matter of fact, in this OkCupid study, it found that your looks is your personality when dating online. They asked women to rate men's profiles in terms of both attractiveness and personality. and the results showed an almost perfect 1-to-1 correlation. As for cold approach, looks is still 70% or so of the equation as you are meeting a girl for the first time, but now social skills and games start to become more relevant, making up to that last 30%. Then finally, for warm approach, this is the most flexible for guys as a plethora of other factors like your social circle, social status, and shared interest with a girl will all come into play. So, as you can see, in each of these environments, looks remains the most important, but is far from being everything. Furthermore, adding a second nuance to this one, the importance of looks will also depend on how good looking you are yourself. This may sound confusing at first, but let me explain. For sub-5s, looks may as well account for 100% of their dating lives, because this is the thing that's causing them to be rejected consistently. You could give a sub-5 an infinite amount of charisma and game, but there will never be a chance a 9 out of 10 women will ever agree to going on a date with him. As for normies, this is the most flexible zone. Looks is still holding them back, but they may also be getting held back by other things too. There is a massive difference in value between a normie who's broke, boring and bashful compared to a normie who's awesome, affluent and articulate. Lastly, for chads, things go full circle here and looks become extremely important again, as their attractiveness can literally carry their dating lives. Even if a chad has nothing else going for him besides his looks, he can still get results as women will make his life easy. So, to wrap up this point, don't get me wrong, Blackpillers do believe looks are important, in fact the most important by far. However, there is nuance that affects how important it is, and they certainly don't believe it is everything. Finally, misconception 4. Blackpillers hate the gender beginning with W. Again, this is another attempt people make to chalk the beliefs off in a single sentence. Now, the reason this idea isn't true is because most Blackpillers accept its teachings as biological facts that can be proven and explained from an evolutionary perspective, and therefore there should be no reason to have a personal hostility against any groups our data speaks about. Simply put, you can't argue with biology, so there's no reason to get upset about it. For example, one of the first teachings on my channel people come across is the height pill. The realization that women want to date guys taller than them, usually in the range of 5 to 10 inches. Now, upon learning this, it's easy to make remarks like, "That's so unfair. This is prejudice. Men can't even change their height." However, arguments like these only generate pointless anger and don't solve anything. Instead, the way I believe is a much better way to respond to things like the height pill, that also shows a deeper level of understanding, is by thinking, yeah, it actually makes sense for women to care about height, because evolutionarily, they want to feel protected. They want to be seen with a man that is perceived as higher status. And they want those characteristics to carry down to their children too, so they also receive this advantage. Now, none of what I've just said is hateful or has an aggressive undertone spoken beneath it. Those were just statements of fact. And that's all there ever is to this channel. And once guys can come to terms with these facts, they can start to think of solutions to overcome the challenges they've been dealt. E.g., women care about height, therefore I'll wear shoes with lifts, not stand next to giants in photos on social media. Fix my posture, which has been making me seem 2 inches shorter than what I truly am. And, as a last resort, move to a foreign country where the data shows men are much shorter on average. This is the essence of what it means to be blackpilled. Learn heavy truths backed by empirical data, come to terms with your shortcomings, and lastly, look for solutions to overcome said shortcomings. That's all there is to it. If other guys want to use the data and let it build anger within themselves, then fine, they can do that. But I'll say again, there is nothing to be angry about biology. It is only what millions of years of evolution has programmed us to do. Anyway, that's all the content for today. If you've enjoyed, make sure you press the like button on your way out and leave any thoughts you have in the comments below, as it all helps the YouTube algorithm.